New Vitamin Water Zero Sugar Pineapple Passion Fruit is packed with vitamins, just like the amount of peas we packed in that sentence. It's packed like your tote bag, the one you stole from your ex, or your overpriced half a studio apartment, or extra rushed rush hour traffic. Packed like your calendar, triple booked at 5, of course. Grab a vitamin water. Did we mention it's packed with vitamins?
This episode is brought to you by LifeLock. Between two-factor authentication, strong passwords, and a VPN, you try to be in control of how your info is protected. But many other places also have it, and they might not be as careful. That's why LifeLock monitors hundreds of millions of data points a second for threats. If your identity is stolen, they'll fix it, guaranteed, or your money back. Save up to 40% your first year. Visit lifelock.com/podcast for 40% off. Terms apply.
Get lost in the acoustic brilliance of 3D audio that surrounds you. Feel the embrace of the massage seats that adapt to your every move. Experience the warmth of a vehicle that welcomes you as you approach. We could tell you what makes a Lincoln SUV so extraordinary, but don't take our word for it. Take it on a test drive at the Lincoln Summer Invitation, with exclusive offers on now, only at your local Lincoln retailer.
Hello, dear listeners. We hope you're enjoying your summer so far. Today, we've got another Grimoire Club teaser for you. In this episode, Alexander takes us through a discussion of 2 stories from Night Shift, a collection of Stephen King's early shorts, Gray Matter and The Lawnmower Man, one of which we like, and one of which we do not like. I also think it's a bit funny that I happened to pick this episode because if the only other Grimoire Club you've listened to was the teaser for Duel by Richard Matheson, you wouldn't know that a very particular sort of quasi-host character emerges over the months of us recording this, which, in this episode, is acknowledged and very briefly addressed. But, you'll see what I'm talking about. If you enjoy this teaser and you want to listen to the rest of the episode, please, I encourage you to sign up for a free trial on our Patreon. We've also got 20 of these, 50 control towers, a bunch of stuff. We'd also love if you stuck around, as we are drumming up some support and excitement for Season 10, parentheses, 10, exclamation mark, exclamation mark, exclamation mark, close parentheses. Yeah, which may or may not involve some sort of pledge drive once again, which we'll give you some more details about further down into the summer, September, such and such. But for now, please, enjoy this teaser, and forgive our strangeness. That's the only way I can put it.
Hello, everyone. I'm Daniel, Grimoire Club. Welcome to another episode of Grimoire Club, broadcasting live from a sinking library in the desert of the end of time. I'm the Daniel Grimoire Club, and with me today are the boys. Jacob, Anthony,
Yes.
Alexander. And this week they're all suspended over a chasm of waterfall sands, tumbling down into endless darkness. They're hanging from a wire. And
Sorry, a what?
you're hanging from a wire.
Oh, a wire, I see.
A wire. And spanning the abysm are several other wires, and on these wires, mechanical spiders. Connecting the mechanical spiders to the other mechanical spiders are more wires, smaller wires. And on those wires, tiny mechanical spiders. Boys, you're in quite a pickle. But while I've got you on the hook, there's no pun there. There's no hooks involved. They're tied to the wires. While I've got you hanging around. There, that's better. Well, I've got you hanging around. I can't think of a better use for our time than to discuss a couple of stories by Stephen King. One of them called Gray Matter. One of them called Lawnmower Man. Alexander, why don't we start with Gray Matter, and why don't you give us a little summary of this story?
Hold on.
I just want to say that. Yeah.
Sorry. Would someone else like to speak in this episode? That wasn't part of my outline.
I just think like very much when I go and do animation, I'm gonna record a sample of Daniel and maybe play that first before because so he gets because Daniel's sounding a little bit more jowly than he usually does, I think, today.
I don't think. Well, no, he's not. It's not jowly. Okay, listen.
Skeleton with jowls.
Before he tied us up in these wires, I did look into one of the many rooms in this library that is in fact also a library. And
We can't be looking in rooms.
I know, but I saw Daniel in there and he was drinking some of that 1800,000-year-old brandy right out of the cask.
Right out of the cask. Daniel.
He'd
Good God.
unhooked. Did something happen,
We
Daniel?
gifted you.
Actually,
gifted you
Jacob, I think you'll
glassware for
find it was
Christmas.
Schlitz beer.
It was Schlitz beer. So
Schlitz
that's
beer.
even worse. Have you seen
was
what
The
hockey
Louis
dads can
XIV's
do?
Reserve Schlitz beer.
Have you seen what hockey dads can do on just one Schlitz beer? It's a
Oh, they could
massacre.
ruin their children's lives.
100 times over. They could ruin the strongest child's life. Anyway,
Strongest child ain't nothing but the weakest dad.
yeah.
When you think about it.
When you think about it, that makes more sense than anything else that's happening today.
How about those spiders, though, eh, boys?
You
Sorry,
know
no,
what? I
Alexander,
got it.
you know-
Credit where credit is due. You do have to hand it to him.
They're gonna eat your eyes.
You have to hand it to him because he doesn't have hands of his own.
You gotta. We say you gotta book it to them around here. If this is your first episode, I'm a skull with hands for books and books for hands. So it's a little joke.
Yeah, there's an established if you're coming if on the off chance you're coming from like the free teaser of when we discussed Richard Matheson's Duel and you're being which an episode which did not have Daniel Grimoire Club. Yes.
Oh, I was
you're like,
there.
and you're
I
like
was implied.
who the fuck is Daniel Grimoire Club? Well, then I suggest you go through this in order because there's a real lore.
Anyway, before the spiders get to me, our first story is Gray Matter. Both of the stories we're talking about today come from a collection called Night Shift, which was Stephen King's first published collection of short stories. As I discovered when I was doing some background on this episode, the collection was kind of put together unintentionally. Stephen King was under contract to produce a number of books for his publisher. The next book that he was working on was The Stand, which he was nowhere near finishing. And some might argue he never indeed did properly finish. The deadline was looming. He needed to give something to the publishers. And so he worked out a deal where he would publish a collection of short stories. Most of these short stories, I think maybe all of them were previously published. The vast majority of them had been published in pornographic magazines, particularly a pornographic magazine by the name of Cavalier. So one of the reasons that I found this collection interesting, and I've chosen these stories as sort of like a shorthand for the whole collection because I do think they sort of sum up the collection, and in some ways do a really good job of capturing a lot of the greater vibe of Stephen King. I chose these short stories because they're representative of the collection, which is really a collection of low art. This is like understanding that these are all stories that were originally published in porno mags really puts them into context, and I think does a lot to, Stephen King has gone on to become probably the most influential writer of the 20th century. And I think the fact that he got his start creating like really low art for scuzzy magazines while he was working in the hospital blood laundry, I think is a wonderful grounding and context for so much of who he is and what he does, so much of his sensibility, and I think a lot of that is on display in these stories. So
Now,
the first story. Oh, sorry. Yeah,
I was gonna
please.
say now I was saying before we recorded that I think you picked a good story and a bad story, but I think Jacob disagrees with me.
Mhm.
Yeah, I am of the opinion that these are both not very good. I think one is worse than the others, though.
Uh-huh.
Also, I just decided I was like, you mentioned it's a pornographic magazine. I'm like, that means different things depending on the like era. So I decided to look it up, and the
Hmm.
first thing that I found was a Cavalier cover with one
Cavalier.
of one of the one of the little like headlines on the front cover just says a hot fistful of wide open horny babes, which is just some beautiful copy.
Yeah,
You
Yeah,
can't
this
is this
recommend
a
wasn't
it
the.
anymore.
is this a porno mag or is this a gentleman's magazine?
Well,
I
if the
thought this was a
phrase
gentleman's magazine,
if the
but
phrase a hot fistful of wide open horny babes doesn't tell you what kind of magazine this is, I don't know what else to. I mean, I could read the next one for you, which says
you
the
know
whores of New Orleans, pussy for a price.
that sounds like
That sounds like a Stephen King story, The Horse
I,
of New
I was gonna
Orleans.
say that sounds like the second installment in a prestige video game franchise.
I think what it sounds like is it sounds like Bad Lieutenant at Port of Call, New Orleans. It's the next follow up.
I didn't look into Cavalier magazine when I was preparing for this episode. I heard the name and I thought, the Cavaliers, the aristocrats. This is a gentleman's magazine, surely. Yes, there will be pornography in it, but it'll be high flying, aesthetic pornography. And apparently, I was laboring under that delusion until I heard the words hot fistful 2 minutes ago.
Yeah, it really sets the scene of the
Mhm.
kind of people that are reading this.
I was just gonna say also that I like your idea that yes, The Horse of New Orleans is the sequel to the Sega CD's Lawnmower Man, but that's something we will get to later.
Absolutely.
Well, before we continue, Jacob, you said one bad story and one worse story. Which is which?
Gray Matter is definitely the better of the two.
Okay,
Uh,
interesting.
I think that Gray Matter is the better of the two. I think Stephen King. I mean, not to bring us full circle here, but these two stories both feel very like Matheson-y to me,
Uh-huh.
but they both feel like imitations of Matheson rather than like the genuine article. It's just that of the two, Gray Matter feels more like the genuine article.
Certainly that's how I felt about Gray Matter, and that's part of the reason why I chose it. Lovecraft by way of Matheson is, I think, maybe how you get to Stephen King. And I think Gray Matter is I chose it not because I think it's the best story in the collection or because it's my favorite story, but because I think it captures some of that essence. So the story we start in a grimy old man bar in Maine in the middle of a blizzard, which is just the non-pariah way to begin a Stephen King story, the perfect way to begin a Stephen King story. A kid walks in to buy beer for his alcoholic father, but he's all freaked out because his father has been on a particularly bad bender and has gotten weird. As the old men in this old man bar sort of like, you know, talk the kid down a bit and get him some food and get him a blanket. They figure out that the old man has drank some beer that had gone wrong, and has just sort of like descended into a pile of blankets on the living room couch, has started to hate the look of sunlight, and has started to, you know, smell really, really bad. The kid at one point like glanced through the keyhole of the door after he left and saw his dad like reach into the wall and pull out a dead cat and eat it. The dad has gotten all fucked up. So the fellows from the bar go to have a talk with the dad. One of them has brought a hog leg 45 with him just to let the dad know their business. They get to the tenement building.
Well,
Sorry.
not just to have a talk with him, but to deliver his beer.
But also deliver the beer, of course.
Also deliver a sweet two for.
It's you want to have a talk with the guy about his alcoholism, but you also want to, make a couple bucks off a sweet two for a Schlitz. Uh, they get to the tenement building. It's too quiet. It smells weird. As they get to the top of the stairs, the sort of leader of the gang realizes that it's not just cats that the dad has been eating. All the neighbors are gone. No one's come around to evict him despite the smell because maybe there's no one left in the building to evict him. They knock on the door. They have a little back and forth.
the father's voice sounds like water in a rubber boot.
And basically, we've got the leader of the old men from the bar as a sort of grizzled, you know, all American type of guy who would have a hog leg 45 and basically says, "Hey, you need to come out and have a talk." He's like,
If I come out, I'm gonna get my beer.
He's like, "Oh, well, why don't you come out and get your beer?" And then the door like explodes and a horrible gray blob man with multiple yellow eyes comes out and engulfs this guy, and the other two run away. And that's where the story ends.
Well, we don't know for sure if he engulfs him, but probably.
I think he engulfs him.
Well, we know that he
I don't
gets
think this is meant to be a Lady and the Tiger type of story where it's like, was he engulfed or was he nay?
Also,
Who can
listeners,
say?
this week in particular, there's this month in particular. These are two very quick reads. If you wanna,
yeah.
if you wanna, establish your own opinions as well.
Mhm.
Well, the
Mhm.
other thing is he does get off a couple shots, and I think the question that they have at the end is, did he succeed in killing him or no? The
Oh,
dad.
also the blob thing was beginning to divide, was beginning
Yeah.
to mitotically divide, and that's sort of described in particularly horrifying, like I would guess, you know, evocatively, perhaps you might say pornographic detail. The
Yeah.
description is pretty gross,
Oh yeah, it's super
of the
gross.
thing beginning to divide. And I wonder about, its placement in a magazine full of gaping genitals, whether that was sort of a deliberate decision and whether, it was meant to be juxtaposed with with a particularly graphic image.
They're not
I don't know.
gaping, they're wide open. It's very
Excuse me.
different.
Excuse me. Yeah, so that's gray matter. Uh, how did you guys feel about this story?
So I obviously this is the much better of the two stories we're talking about today. I
Mhm.
would go so far as to say I enjoyed it. I liked it. It was good.
Mhm.
Um, I think in both stories, mind you, it's been a very long time since I've read King or tried to read King.
Mhm.
I think there was a book that I read in high school. I don't remember the title of it. It's about a young girl who gets lost, out on a nature walk. She's in the forest by herself for like a week. I don't remember the title of it. I also tried to read The Dark Tower when I was 13. Couldn't do it.
Mhm.
Just so it's the first time I've come to King in a while, and this is early King too, so take what I'm saying with a pinch of salt. But he wields words like a great big wooden club. I feel like it's just I think I think more so than anyone we discussed up to this point, there's really just a blunt utilitarianism to the way he writes and composes sentences and drops details, which I appreciate, and I think it's not a critique. I think it's just a style, and I noticed it's just very like, and also both of these stories are about like men and working men and what have you.
Mhm.
But also just again, it's a quick story, but there's good build. I think the buildup is good. There's a lot of like just enough macabre, awful little details dropped in, like how he's talking about in at one point the father gets the boy to start cooking, heating up his beer on the stove top, and just that little throwaway. And when they're walking up the stairs to the apartment, how he describes it smelling like a cider house in the summer, not a
Mhm.
cider house in the fall when it's all nice and sweet. But yeah, it's makes sense to me that it's early. It makes sense in the context of where it's been published and in this anthology. And I think it's effective though. I think it I've written worse things. I think I might have written better things than this
Mhm.
personally, but I've definitely written much worse things as well.
For better or worse, Stephen King will always show you the monster.
Yeah.
Uh, one of the people, one of the things, people criticize Lovecraft for much more substantial things than this. But one of the critiques that he gets is that he only works because his reader's imagination is better than his. And he doesn't actually he'll never actually properly show you the thing because he maybe doesn't have it clear in his head and is just relying on you to do that work for him. Stephen King, say what you will about him. He's got the set piece in his head. He knows what the monster looks like. He's got the like pulp cover already drafted and ready to go. He'll show you the monster. If you're looking to see a monster, Stephen King's just going to show you the monster. And sometimes that's very dumb, and sometimes it works. And I think this story is maybe right in between. Um, I think there's one detail about the monster in this story that elevates it above not quite working, because it is sort of a big gray goo. It is sort of the blob, but the detail about the yellow eyes kind of elevates it for me, specifically in the way that it kind of quietly ties this story into a broader Stephen King mythos. But I'll talk a little bit more about that at the end.
Oh, I thought you were going to say that it ties into alcoholism.
Oh, tell me more about that.
Well,
you think like jaundice. You're
jaundice dies,
yellow eyes in the sense of jaundice.
Yeah, like
oh, that's interesting.
Liver disease.
That's very interesting because I was reading that as yellow eyes in the sense of like yellow in the way that a cat's eyes are yellow, or the way that a demon's eyes are yellow.
I think that also makes sense. I think it's everything. I think he's a good enough writer that a symbol can be more than one thing for him.
Mm-hmm. And I wonder if the way that I'm reading this is sort of reading it back. At the time, this was a story about alcoholism, and so there were yellow jaundiced eyes, and then it's only in after reading a bunch of things that he wrote later where he sort of collects a mythos together kind of accidentally, I think, out of a bunch of different stories that he's trying to sort of reconcile into his own version of the Cthulhu mythos. It's only after that the yellow eyes takes on a different connotation. But yeah, Jacob, why don't before we get too much into this, why don't you tell us how you felt about the story? Because I think you're maybe a little more critical about it than Anthony and I are.
What Anthony said about King using words sort of as like a cudgel applies really well here. And this is actually something that I really like about King, is I think that he's a master of sort of getting very quickly into the voice of a character and staying there, and having that character speak to you through the story. So like in this story, you mentioned that it starts with this it starts in this old man shitty bar. And I feel like everybody really talks and reasons like old men in a shitty bar. And I think that's a much harder thing to do than many people think, because it means really limiting your scope. Like Stephen King's a smart guy. He's made millions of dollars at this point in his career. Like Carrie was already a runaway success, and now he needs to like get into the headspace of a person that he just isn't in many ways, and stay there. And make sure that the story follows in these characters. So like, they hear about this stuff, and instead of like getting the kid maybe a psychoanalyst or something, they get the dude's 45 caliber.
They're like, well, we're going to
pistols.
go give the dad some beer and threaten him with a gun.
Exactly.
Well,
and
of course.
They also get him a sandwich and a bowl of soup.
Yeah.
I think that's important.
And make sure that he's like sitting with one of their wives, I think, as well.
There's a tenderness there.
Yeah, there's a tenderness and
a clumsy tenderness
and a protectiveness that probably should have been activated far sooner. And I don't know if King is sort of being critical of that. Obviously, we know that King around this time was probably pretty deep in his own drug addiction. So another thing that I like about the story is I think I sort of view it a little bit as a like self-portrait. Like King is writing about himself. Yeah. And I think that's I think it's always better when writers are writing about themselves, because I think that they understand that material better, obviously. And I think that gives it the ring of truth, even if I can't point to exactly what that ring of truth is. And I think the other thing that I like about the story is that there is a sort of, I think the thing that we forget about King, besides his like ability to just like get into a voice and stay there, is also like he's a pretty masterful like writer. I kind of forgot that until I was reading these stories, and like as much as I didn't necessarily like everything in these stories, or even think that they were particularly good, I couldn't deny like the quality of the writing. Like it's smooth. It goes down very, very smooth. And I think that there's a tendency to associate good writing with like writing that's difficult to read, or writing that takes a long time to read. And I
Hmm.
think King is the opposite. I think King is a master in part because, you know, this Anthony, the line that you mentioned is perfect. This thing about cider house in the summer as opposed to
Yeah.
cider house in the fall. It's a perfect example of like I've never been to a cider house in the summer, but
Hmm.
it doesn't take him more than a sentence to like put me there.
Hmm.
And that's
Yeah.
really difficult to do. The last thing I like about the story is exactly what you mentioned, Alexander, which is this mitotic division. Because up to the point in which we see this like fungal dad, uh, it feels like the story is on like train tracks. Like we know
Hmm.
exactly what is going to happen. And he throws that final little twist in there that like they got there at just the right time, but also maybe still too late.
Hmm.
Is to me like the thing that really like that final twist is something that I think is key to a lot of really good short horror. Something that like recontextualizes everything that you heard before.
Hmm. Yeah,
Uh,
it's not just it's not just something that you can the thing that's happening in this building is not something that you can just MR James. You can't just be like, well, and we closed up the building and we never went inside again, and that's that.
yeah,
Because there's a broader existential threat underneath it. And I think that's pretty universal in Stephen King. Like the problems in a Stephen King book are never contained. They're always something that are going to spread out and infect life outside of the sort of little arena of the story.
that's a good point. Yeah, it's this idea of like small towns and being safe places.
Hmm.
But in Stephen King's world, a lot of these smaller communities, they're like the progenitors of bad, really, really bad things,
Hmm.
which you could look at as like a political statement, even.
Yeah.
Uh, but oh yeah, and then the things that I don't like about it is I think that, you know, a lot of what it's trying to say is really obvious. And
Hmm.
as much as I really like that sort of ending point and like it's actually I guess two twists at the end, because there's also the twist of like discovering that the dad has been like, you know, going after people in the community basically.
Hmm.
Um, I think that, you know, the theme is a little too obvious,
Hmm.
which can make it a little tiring to read,
Hmm.
because it's a little like, okay, I get it, I get what this is about. Faster,
Yeah.
faster, like please stop wasting my
Hmm.
time. But I think that's
Hmm.
also a response that I'm having as a writer, not as like a like strictly as like I think like as a reader, if I was just a reader, I don't think it would bother me as much. And then like as much as I think he's a very good writer, I think that there's like I still think there's like a clumsiness to this. It feels like it was written extremely quickly.
Hmm.
The story doesn't have much room to breathe.
It
Uh,
feels like early work. It feels
yes,
like someone's still
exactly,
sort of finding their feet.
exactly.
Um, and it feels like it's meant for a pulp magazine. It's meant to be cheap, quick entertainment. It's sort of like this could be an EC comic.
Yeah,
It
I mean,
has that sort of
that's why
like
I like it. But that's also
yeah, the like
eternal
pulp
the
cheap
eternal
color.
duality between us.
Hmm. It's got the
and
pulp
usually I
cheap
like that.
color, simple, obvious like visual. But there's something that I find really really appealing about that. Um, but yeah, I think he later in his career does produce a lot more work with a more literary bent and a more thoughtful bent. Uh, I think this for me is like a good pulp story. This is like a pulp story that you're reading like there's actually something there. Um, whereas I think a lot of his other work is short fiction. This is a pulp story, and then most of his short stories are short fiction, capital S, capital F.
Hmm.
And I think it's interesting to see, in this collection, maybe his work transitioning from one genre to the other. There's also something interesting to me about this kind of short story being a thing that I think doesn't really exist so much anymore. Because
Hmm.
I think, like there aren't like porno magazines that publish, schlocky pulp
I,
like
mean, I feel
fantasy
like
and
this is
horror
like
stories.
I don't want to discredit us, but I feel like this is kind of like this is up our alley.
Oh
This is a
yeah,
little bit of what we do, to be
This is
perfectly
absolutely.
honest.
the niche in the fiction market that we fill.
Yeah, I mean, like a story like this. Yeah,
Hmm.
this is easily slots into season one, two, three of
But
Rung Station.
Hmm.
well, that's true. I also think
I read a
there's a
lot more pretentious crap.
but I also think that there's while I think that is true, like this does slot in, I think there is a difference between like the medium is the message type thing,
Yes,
we're
that's
doing
fair.
audio. It's not a written thing. I think there's a lot of like really small press, like sci-fi fantasy folks out there and horror presses as well. But I think you're right. They like there is again, medium is the message. Like they aren't publishing alongside you know, porn. They're publishing small press like sci-fi fantasy horror that's like a lot more self-aware and a lot less about like pulpy entertainment.
It's for people who read science fiction, fantasy, horror, for
I
people who have read a lot of it, who have opinions on it,
Yeah.
who like believe in the genre enough to spend their own hard money to subscribe to and fund this like particular thing. It's a really different audience, and I think the kind of writing that you do for that audience is different, and it
That's a
produces
really
something
good point.
different.
This is, this is the audience of people like you said they sit down and they read this stuff intentionally as opposed to King's audience, which is that these are dudes who just need something to do after they just cranked it. They're just sitting there and they
Basically,
have the
yeah.
magazine. They have the
Uh-huh.
magazine. They're sitting in bed. They're like,
Hmm.
well, that's done.
Yeah.
I have another 45 minutes on my lunch break.
Oh no, they're sitting in bed on their lunch break. Oh,
Yeah,
the
they,
like shared one, the shared cranking it bed in the back of the office, of course. Yeah.
yeah.
It's the 1970s. Every single factory has a communal cranking it bed and a shared copy of Cavalier magazine.
And I mean, and also they all feel terrible after masturbating because
Because they
self.
still got Christianity.
Well, yeah, they still. I was about to say
They still got
self-esteem hadn't been
Catholicism.
invented yet, but I like they still had Christianity. They hadn't removed it
Yeah.
from
They hadn't
sex
had
yet.
it. They hadn't had it excised from their brains.
Yeah.
Geez, I just cranked it again. Guess I gotta elevate myself by reading the story about this gray goop. Oh my God, it's making me reflect on my own parenting strategies. I
Maybe I
gotta
won't
upgrade
make my.
from I gotta upgrade from Schlitz to Pabst.
I don't know if it's I don't know if it's that deep. Maybe it's just about a great goopy man. I don't
That's
know.
a great goopy man, yeah.
Also,
You
medium
know,
is the message, huh? Maybe that's why I enjoyed this, is because I read it
Mm,
out loud in my head, because I heard myself reading it in my head. Maybe that's why
nice.
I enjoyed it.
That's a good point. Oh,
I
I like
I will
that.
say absolutely, Jacob. It goes down smooth. The
it goes down
writing,
smooth.
no matter what it is, it goes down smooth, and
Yep.
that's why I don't want to jump ahead too much. But just Alexander, you really teed Lawnmower Man up. You were like, I'm picking this because this is a piece of shit. And the first two or three pages I was reading, I was like, this is fine. This is
This is
like
Yeah, it is.
This
The
is
first few
actually
pages are
something.
fine.
We're going somewhere with this, aren't we?
and then the rest of it happened. It was like, oh,
Oh,
this
yeah.
fucking sucks.
Oh
But
yeah,
the
he
writing
he
still goes down smooth.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, he has this really fluent prose style that doesn't call attention to itself until these moments of these really um, affecting metaphors or analogies, like the cider house one. Like I think in every piece of Stephen King writing, there will be something like that, just like an analogy that stands out, that is
Hmm.
so that is so rooted in a really specific physical sense, that is so rooted in like a time and a place that you don't know, but that Stephen King is intimately aware of because he's done some sort of like grueling labor in that place. And I think that's one of the tremendous strengths of his writing. And yeah, I think we see it in this story in like the old man bar and the feeling of that main town in the middle of a blizzard. I just love the setting of this story. I love the vibe of it. I love the aesthetic of it. I agree with you, Jacob, that it's not the most elegant or thoughtful or surprising work in a lot of ways, but just as a pure vibes piece, I think there's something that he's really captured here. And also to what Anthony was saying, the simplicity of it is something that I really this season I think I need to really try and write some things that are really simple like this.
But there's also specificity. It's simplicity and specificity because it's like it's not a bar. I don't think it's really a bar. It could have been a bar, and that would have been easy.
It's a corner store, I
but
think.
it's like a it's like a
Yeah.
corner store, general store type thing. It's like this, you know, it's this kind of thing you can imagine working the way it does because it just works.
Yeah.
And that's what the owners wanted to do it. And it's like a little, you know, they come either for coffee or they come for beers.
Yeah.
It's this shitty little bodega, and he also just hawks 2 4s out of his basement.
Yeah. It's a combination between a Delta sports bar, a Greek cafe,
Yeah,
the
and then with
general store, and the and the Welch common room at
and then with the added
at
detail
college.
that, like, you know, he's got the flat upstairs. You know, he takes the boy upstairs so his wife can cook him a dinner. It really like paints a picture in your head of like this building, and like then this block, just what this little neighborhood looks like.
Yeah. Yeah, the town is a really defined space. You get a real clear sense of what sort of place this is. And that that's something that I think he captures really really well in his writing. I think he's really good at setting up a clear arena for his stories to play out in, and having the place where the story happens be the right place for the story to happen. Lawnmower Man. I think there's less to talk about in Lawnmower Man because I think this is a story where he was